Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Councilman Clanton Connect Live. I'm Councilman Carlos Clanton, and I want to thank you for joining us for this really special Homeownership Month edition of our program. Housing is one of the most important issues facing our city today. It impacts our neighborhoods, our economy, our workforce, and even our quality of life. And as co-chair of the Mayor's Housing Commission, I have an opportunity to work with residents, community leaders, housing professionals, and stakeholders to examine Norfolk's housing needs and identify opportunities for the future. Tonight, we'll explore housing from two different perspectives. First, we'll discuss the future of housing in Norfolk, housing affordability, future development opportunities, and the St. Paul's Transformation Project. Then we'll focus on the practical pathways to home ownership and the resources available to help Norfolk residents prepare for and achieve the dream of owning a home. Whether you're a homeowner, a renter, a first-time buyer, or simply interested in the future of Norfolk, this conversation is for you. So let's get started. Our first guest this evening is none other than Dr. Susan Perry. She's the director of Norfolk's Department of Housing and Community Development. Dr. Perry has been instrumental in helping guide Norfolk's housing strategy and advancing important conversations about housing affordability, neighborhood development, housing supply, and long-term community growth. Tonight, we'll discuss the interim housing report and Norfolk's housing challenges, opportunities, future development initiatives, and the progress being made through the St. Paul's transformation. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Susan Perry.
Good evening.
Hey, good evening, Dr. Perry.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. So we're just going to jump right in. And I appreciate you. I know you've been at a conference for the last couple of days and you're coming back in. And so I appreciate you sharing in with us here. But I just want to go ahead and just jump right in. So, can you give us an overview of the current housing landscape here in the city of Norfolk?
Of course. Norfolk is very interesting in that it has one of the most diverse housing stocks in Hampton Roads. And so we've got, single family historic neighborhoods. We've got new and emerging mixed use districts. We have lots of multifamily. But we also have a really great mix of what we call missing middle housing. These are your triplexes, your duplexes, your small scale multifamily that you don't often see in more suburban cities. And this also sort of makes that type of housing naturally affordable, what we call NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing. But unfortunately, we also have an aging housing stock. And so that makes housing preservation just as important as housing production in Norfolk. And then finally, I think the other big thing about sort of our housing landscape is that more than 50% of Norfolk's population are renters. This is actually a trend that we're seeing nationwide. As you mentioned, I was at a conference that just came back from the National Housing and Community Development Conference, and data there we heard talked about how the cost of owning a home is higher than ever. It remains a major challenge for most people, and that it's 44% more expensive today to own a home. And that's largely due to interest rates. So when COVID happened, lots of people locked in at 4% or lower. And so those folks are not exiting or buying new homes because they've got a great interest rate. And so that sort of means that we don't have as much supply out in the market. But we're also seeing that renters are staying renters 14 years longer than they did in 1984. And so with homeowners at very low interest rates, less likely to sell, that reduces the inventory. And then you've got renters staying renters longer because of that limited inventory, all rising, making home prices rise.
Oh, that was a lot. You didn't think about it. I mean, I knew that serving on the Housing Commission as co-chair there, that 56% of renters. And, when we talk about economic mobility, trying to get everyone to be able to achieve that home ownership. And I often say that if you look at a city like Norfolk, that's pretty much 98% practically built out, you're not going to get the traditional house and an acre of land. And you mentioned that missing middle, that there's opportunities for ownership But I think that when Ms. Fortes come on later to talk about some of the programs that we have here, you just mentioned one of the major barriers, and that's the cost.
Mhm.
We have programs that are in place, but the cost, you're not finding many entry-level homes that are $250,000. You just don't find that. So thinking about the next thing, what are some of the most significant housing challenges kind of like facing the city? I know we talked about some of those things there, limited housing supply and so forth that you have here, but you want to address that?
Yeah, so I mean, we are seeing affordability being the biggest issue, right? Both for renters and homeowners. So we have costs that are rising faster than incomes, and so households are feeling the strain. So we've got almost 40 or a little bit more than 40% of Norfolk households are what is considered housing cost burden, meaning they pay more than 30% of their income towards housing cost. The result of that is, they have less residual income to spend on things like savings or transportation or childcare, or even, eating out or going to the movies. I would say another big housing challenge that we talked about earlier is our older housing stock. So much of it needs, sort of reinvestment so that it remains affordable and it remains viable housing into the future. And then just this, this mismatch between income and rent, meaning, that households aren't able to afford the rent. And so we're seeing a lot of times people are either renting up, they're renting or buying a home that is more than what they can afford on the market.
Wow. So what are some of the key findings? We just had the interim housing report that was just released from the commission. But what were some of the key findings that came out of that report?
Yeah, so we were asked, the Housing Commission was asked to create a policy that would guide the work in the area. And so we looked at several things, a lot of different research that went into this interim report that would ultimately be used to guide the policy. So, of course, we looked at inventory and affordability. We've talked about the affordability data points already, but what we also saw is that Norfolk, has a significant share of units that are considered affordable, utilizing that threshold, that 30% income threshold that we talked about. We said again that we have a higher share of renters at 57%, but that you can see it's even higher than the national average, which is 30%. We talked a lot about how housing and education are linked. And so obviously housing that is multifamily or built for children or families with children can increase the demand on the public schools. And if it's all concentrated in one area, can really lower educational outcomes if the schools in those particular neighborhoods aren't sufficiently resourced. We looked a lot at housing choice vouchers and whether or not those could be used not just for rent, but also for mortgages. We know homeownership is the way to create wealth. And so the answer to that is yes, they can be used for both. And it really kind of depends on the use, on whether or not you need immediate housing. Then you may look at using them as a rental option, or using it to support homeownership, which I know LaShawn will talk about later. And that really requires that we have homes that are affordable within the HUD limits in order to be able to utilize that voucher towards a mortgage. We also talked about the impact of new supply. So I'll sort of move around on these slides a little bit, but we saw that Norfolk and Newport News had the most subsidized housing in the region, with Norfolk holding 48% of the region's public housing, despite having just 17% of the region's population. We saw lower numbers of subsidized units in Virginia Beach and Chesapeake. And when they do have that affordable subsidized housing, it's usually for special populations like seniors or individuals with disabilities. The result of that is not really having this regional cooperation to understand, if Norfolk builds a disproportionate share of the affordable housing for the region, does it then attract folks from other cities and that may unintentionally displace our local residents? So therefore, local residents who maybe are looking for affordable housing are therefore pushed out of the market because we've got other folks from other cities coming in because there's not enough affordable housing in those cities. And then finally, we did some fiscal impact research, not a full fiscal impact analysis, but looked at calls for service at various types of housing types and income levels to understand, is there sort of this break-even point of, larger affordable multifamily developments or even market rate multifamily developments generate higher service calls than, say, single-family homes, and therefore it's more pull on city services than, say, higher value single-family homes or market rate multifamily homes, even after accounting for school costs. So all of that, again, will get put into just sort of data that will help drive the policy recommendations that this commission creates.
Definitely. So, hearing all of that, why is housing affordability such an important issue for Norfolk residents?
I can't hear you, Councilman. I'm sorry.
Oh, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? All right. Can you hear me now, Susan?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can hear you. You can't hear me? Bring myself back in there. All right. Can you hear me now? All right. Let me disappear a little bit there. All right. So, Dr. Perry, why is housing affordability such an important?
I cannot hear you, but I could go to the next slide if you can hear me.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. So housing supply, often you hear, what is Norfolk's housing supply and why does that matter? And so that is really looking at the difference between the number of households at any given income level and the number of available affordable homes to that group. And for Norfolk, we do see that there is a gap of just over 6,700 for our lowest income level households, so $50,000 a year or below, and particularly for those making less than $35,000 a year. Interestingly, since we did this report, we've also now begun to see a gap at the higher level of the income range as well. And so some of the things that we are looking at is whether or not there are households, renting up or buying down. So going into housing that is cheaper than what the income they can actually afford, squeezing out lower income individuals who actually need that housing. Or if there is actually, this big of a supply gap of number of units. But obviously housing supply matters because if it doesn't keep up with demand, then the prices just continue to rise, and therefore making it out of reach again for individuals in those lower income ranges.
So I don't. Can you still not hear me? Okay. So the St. Paul's transformation.
Yes. So the commission and our department obviously watches all of these trends. We've got various programs in place, but the biggest one obviously is our effort here in St. Paul's. This is a redevelopment that focuses not just on the physical redevelopment, but obvious of lifting up the residents at the same time. So we really say it's, sort of parallel efforts of both people and place. This is work we do in partnership with the Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority to create resilient mixed income communities. We are improving all of the infrastructure in the community in former Tidewater Gardens, now the Kindred neighborhood, creating amazing green space amenities, increasing connectivity to downtown. But the biggest success of this redevelopment is the focus on people and expanding services, supportive services to families. And so our People First approach and initiative is a program that works with families on these 4 pillar areas. So it's education, economic mobility, health, and housing stability. Obviously, housing is the foundation of all the other things. We have to make sure that folks are stably housed before we can begin to work with them on education, economic mobility, and health. Council believed in this program. It was a program that we developed in coordination with residents, and invested $3.5 million every year into this program that provides supportive services to residents. And you can see some of the outcomes here. We've been working with families for just over 6 years now. We've got an engagement rate of 96%. So residents are really doing the work to move their families to stable and thriving. When we started, our annual wage income was just at $14,000 a year. It's now at almost $30,000 a year. We've got 100% of children and 96% of adults have health insurance. That was only at 22% when we began. We've got folks who are reporting being in good standing with their property manager or landlord. And last year we had a 92% high school senior graduation rate, with more than half of those individuals moving on to college. A big part of the redevelopment, obviously, is also housing. And so we are building back 714 total units of housing. And you can see here that we've got housing with direct rental assistance, so project-based vouchers, and affordable units that are income restricted up to 80% of area and median income and below. And returning Tidewater Gardens residents have the ability to move back into both of those types of units. And then we've got 184 that are unrestricted or market rate. And actually Tidewater Gardens residents could also move into the market rate units. As a part of that, we're building 70 of those project-based voucher apartments off-site and other privately developed projects, which I'm going to show you in an upcoming slide. But the whole idea is to rebuild a neighborhood that is resilient and sustainable. There's more construction underway. So we've got 191 units under construction now that will be delivered at the end of this year and in January of 2027. So that's another 3 blocks of housing. And that's the first time that we'll begin to see some of that lower density housing, not just the larger apartment buildings, but also townhouses and cottages and walk-up apartments. And then the final phase of 193 units will close in the next couple of months as well. But all of the every block, every building is mixed income and built with the highest quality amenities. This has also spurred a lot of other development, though. And so I mentioned those 70 offsite apartments, but they're built in these buildings that you see here. So 236 units of affordable housing at Riverside Station off of Curlew Avenue. And we've got 40 or so project-based vouchers in there, but the entire development is affordable. Same thing with Market Heights across Tidewater Drive, and the Aspire building at Church Street in Brambleton has 85 units of affordable housing. And then coming sometime next year will be the construction of the station in Midtown, which is another 154 units of mixed income housing. I know you wanted me to talk about the commercial space, and I'm sorry, I still can't hear you, sir. So I'm just going to keep rolling unless you tell me
I know you're rolling,
otherwise.
can you still not hear me?
Okay. And so all within these apartment buildings, again, it's mixed income, but it's also mixed use. And so we've got a large opportunity for the neighborhood to have neighborhood serving housing that is all of the things that somebody would want within a 5-minute walk of their house. And so 39,000 square feet of commercial space. We're looking for a blend of national and local tenants. We've got small retail, office, healthcare space, and lots of opportunity there. The first retail opportunity that came online just a couple of weeks ago was the McDonald's that had been there previously, had to be moved due to needing to move a road for the redevelopment of the community. And we ensured that it was able to come back into the ground floor here. It's very cool urban style McDonald's with a double drive-through, ability to walk up for late night snacks, and they're doing great things there. Hiring folks from the community as well. So that's sort of the big national anchor tenant there along St. Paul's Boulevard. And the developer, Brinshore, has other 5 to 7 spaces ready to go now. And you can see here how one could get involved if somebody is interested. We'd love for them to connect with Stanton McDuffie here with his contact information. And then just very quickly, obviously the city is making a big investment in people, but also all the infrastructure had to be replaced in the community. And so we've invested more than $85 million in doing just that, reconnecting the community through the road systems and really creating this amazing neighborhood that is walkable, bikeable, and will have the most amazing park system for residents in the city in general to enjoy. And so that will be a 22-acre blue greenway. And if you go to the next screen, you can see it in relation to downtown and all of that green space that will be available beside this new neighborhood, but also access to lots of other neighborhoods as well. It will have walking trails. It will have 2 large community buildings, one for large events, a smaller one for civic engagement types of activities. It will have basketball courts, exercise stations, playgrounds, an amphitheater. It is going to be an incredible place for the neighborhood, but for the city at large. And then finally, sort of what our next major housing initiatives are, is our department is really looking at how do we sort of crack the nut on that missing middle housing. It provides a little bit more density. Again, it's naturally affordable because of the density, but it can fit very well as infill housing in neighborhoods. So those are your duplexes, triplexes, what we call the Norfolk 6-pack that you see in lots of places, particularly in the Ghent neighborhood. One of the things coming out of the Housing Commission is how do we utilize commercial properties that are no longer needing to lots of folks are still working remotely, and so they no longer need these big commercial spaces. And so how do we utilize those for residential use instead? We're doing a housing conditions study. And so we really want to understand, again, we've got the aging housing stock. How do we make sure that we focus our funding in the areas of greatest need? So you'll see that coming out from our department as well. Lots of talk in the housing community about accessory dwelling units. So these are the mother-in-law suites or the sort of smaller type housing that can be built on a property of a single family home. And planning's been doing a great job at making that available and easy to build. Obviously, we're going to continue to work with the Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority on the master planning for the next phases of the St. Paul's redevelopment. And then as soon as that Housing Commission produces its housing policy, our department will pick that up and move that forward.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That was a lot of information there. I don't know if you still can't hear me, Dr. Perry. Yeah. So I know Dr. Perry's there. She can't hear me down there, but we'll get back in there. We are looking at our second phase, and I'm going to bring in our next speaker here. So I'm going to take Perry out. We have our second guest for this evening, is Miss LaShawn Fortes. She's a community development director, homeownership director for the Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority. While housing policy helps shape our future, many residents are also asking a more personal question: how do I become a homeowner? LaShawn works directly with programs and resources that help individuals and families prepare for home ownership, navigate the home buying process, and access valuable assistance programs. Tonight, we'll discuss HomeNet, first-time homebuyer resources, financial readiness, down payment assistance, and practical steps residents can take toward home ownership. So at this time, I'd like to have you all please join me in welcoming Ms. LaShawn Fortes to the program.
Thank you, Councilman Clanton, for having me this evening, and I look forward to talking about home ownership and hope that we answer all the questions, that the audience want to hear.
Great. All right, for some reason, I'm not seeing your camera there, but we're going to bring you in. Are you still there?
I'm here. Can you see me?
I can't see you, but I can hear you, though.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
If you want to go.
Yeah, there we go.
It's funny. I can see myself on the slide. I can see myself on.
Yeah, and I can see you down there too. It's the wonders of technology. We'll keep rolling with it. So let's just jump right in. So why is homeownership important for individuals, families, and communities?
Councilman Clanton, homeownership remains one of the most effective pathways to building wealth and legacy. And I heard Dr. Perry talk about Tidewater and People First. We just had a resident who was able to, purchase her first home. We had a resident who purchased using their HCV in 2002 and purchased her home for $200,000. And now it's worth $280,000. That's $80,000 that she gained within 4 years. And it's not too many people who can save $80,000, in 4 years. So it's still one of the most important ways and pathways to building wealth and legacy. So we look at financial stability and long-term wealth. We talk about increases of rent. When you purchase, you know what your monthly payment is going to be. It's stable. And we know that life happens, but when life happens, I always tell a story, I'll be like the Golden Girls, so I said I would never be homeless because if I have rooms to rent, I will rent them. If life happens, job loss, because who would have thought, COVID would happen and so many people would lose their jobs. So it gives you more options, when you own versus, renting. You have equity that grows over time. So if that house never appreciates, meaning goes up in value, every payment that you make, I always say is a forced savings. So you have equity that builds, just like we talked about the young lady who purchased in 2022, and now she has $80,000 in equity in her home, and she's looking at whether she wants to buy another home and move up, or stay where she is. Housing security and stability. When you rent, you're looking at, I have a lease for 12 months, but my landlord can come next year and tell me I have to move or they're not going to renew my lease. With a home, I always say it's stable. It's yours. If you stay there for 30 years, it's paid for, and you gain wealth in that. And generational wealth. I always look at passing down that legacy, so now I kind of teach when you own your first one, a lot of times we have to sell it, but why not keep it and rent it if you can? I look at my parents and they left us a home, that we currently have the family home. My father had another home, so when I look at that wealth, that passes down. So I look at my own wealth in terms of home ownership, so we have already decided we're passing that down to the grandkids. So we're skipping a generation, so you have options, right? And also stronger communities, because when you live in your community and you own, you engage more, you want to get involved more versus if you're renting.
Absolutely. So I know you're housed with NRHA, the Norfolk Redevelopment and Housing Authority. So what role, tell us a bit about NRHA's role in supporting home ownership.
Yeah, and our HomeNet started in 2002. And so our role, we have housing counselors on staff who are certified housing counselors. We help you develop a plan, a roadmap to where you are and where you need to go, because most people just don't know where to start. We deploy the down payment and closing cost assistance for the city of Norfolk in partnership with them. We have financial coaching because we know that first-time home buyers, they need that constant hand-holding, constant reinforcement and coaching to let them know that they can do it. And then we have a team of community partners, that we know where the money is, the grants, the down payment, the special interest rate loans, and different banks have different grants that they have available. So what we try to do is we layer those grants to give the client the best opportunity to lower their mortgage payment. And the average mortgage payment we have, when they purchase is about $1,600 a month. Okay, and I would say since 2021, we've had 106 home buyers, and that equated to $22 million in real estate sales in the city of Norfolk, since 2021, I'm sorry.
Wow, congratulations on that one. I mean, you said 1,600 in mortgage. I mean, I'm paying at least a couple hundred more in rental, which is important because you think about the money that you just keep spending out to somebody who else owns the property rather than you owning it.
And when you look at that, and I always say if the average say 1,400 and you're paying for 10 years, that's 168,000 you just paid to the landlord.
Yeah. Definitely.
So you're absolutely correct.
Wow. So you mentioned HomeNet. So what is HomeNet and how does it help prospective home buyers?
Yeah, so HomeNet, we are a HUD counseling agency. I always say Homeownership Center, one-stop shop to homeownership. So when you come into the program, we look at your finances, where you are, credit-wise, savings, what you need to do to get there. What does your debt look like? What does your debt to income ratio? So we're preparing you to become mortgage ready to go to the lender, to get a market rate loan. So I would say the average time a person might spend in a program is 2 years, because the biggest barrier towards homeownership is saving, and credit. Also student loans is a big issue, as well, when families come in. So we take a holistic approach. We put an action plan together. We put a roadmap together, and we give people 3 pieces, bites at a time. So it's like, okay, here's your roadmap. This is what you need to do. And so let's take 3 steps, at a time, another 3 steps, to get you to that place of where you need to be. So it takes a lot of commitment, a lot of time, but you might have some clients who come in who are already ready. They just need some support, to get through that process and some understanding and guidance.
Definitely. You mentioned those steps. So what are some of the first steps? Person wants to start, I want to become a homeowner.
I would say the first thing you need to do is meet with a housing counselor, because they can let you know exactly where you are, where you need to be. They're going to look at affordability. They're going to educate you on needs versus wants. They're going to educate you and show you how to develop a spending plan, because the one thing we want is families to be comfortable when they get in that home. So we always say the lender's going to qualify you on your gross income, but we live off our what? Net income.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like, what is your comfort level? So when you go to the lender, you can let your lender know, this is what I'm comfortable at. Can you give me a qualification based off of that? And then take it from that standpoint. So the education of just not knowing. Also, a lot of clients go to the first lender. That might not be the best lender because they might not have additional grants and down payment and interest rate reductions. So you want to do your research, so because again, you're going to be a first-time home buyer one time. I remember when I purchased my first home, no one told me about any type of grant programs, what was available, and I qualified for every last one of them.
Oh, wow.
So they're going to review your finances, your budget. They're going to look at your credit and tell you what you need to do. So if you don't have a credit score of 620, they're going to tell you what you need to do to increase your credit score, what you need to pay down, what you need to pay off. And also they're going to put a plan together for your savings, so after you pay your debt off, what type of residual finances do you have to build up your savings? And then we're going to talk about tax returns, and maybe, next year when you get your tax return, we can put that in the bank and save. And then we're going to send you to an educational class, a Virginia housing educational class, to also talk about all the steps you need to do. And then we're going to get you mortgage approved. So the biggest thing is having someone there with you from start to finish, so from the credit piece to going into contract, to the home inspection, to closing. Because we want to let everybody know, even once you close, life happens and we're still here for you. So we want them to call us, so if they get in trouble, they can call us real early and we can help them navigate that process.
Absolutely. LaShawn, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take a brief pause. I'm going to have you log out and re-log back in and see if that'll restart your camera, just so that people can see your face as you're talking here. So we're going to do that. I'm going to do a brief pause and we'll come right back. Okay?
Okay.
There we go. LaShawn, we got you back. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I had to log in from my phone, so I'm not sure I couldn't get back on at all. We're gonna pivot.
Not a problem, but I wanted to make sure that people could see you. It's like, here's all this great information, but I appreciate you coming back. And for those who may be joining here, and definitely, particularly with these lives, a lot of people go back and watch this stuff later. They'll see it like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. I get messages all the time. Oh, I learned this and that. But so you talked about the financial piece. So why is it so important to ensure that you're financially ready?
When you go to that lender and sit in front of that lender, you want to have everything organized and ready to go. And a lender will tell you, that you're not ready or you are ready or things that you need to do. but it gives you a little bit more confidence, when you have everything ready prior to going. And that's the great thing about meeting with the housing counseling, because they're looking at your income. They're looking at your debt to income ratio. What is that? That's your income coming in versus your debt going out, which determines how much payments you can actually afford. They're looking at your credit history. They don't want to see any late payments in the last 12 months. They're looking at your employment history. They want you to be employed for a minimum of 2 years. They're looking at your savings, because they want to make sure that you can make that payment and also have reserves at usually a minimum of 2 payments saved up before you can actually purchase. So the better the credit score, and this is what I tell everybody, because you can find a lender out there who can give you a mortgage, with a 580 credit score, but are you going to get the best interest rate? And we want you to get the best interest rate. So we're going to help you increase that credit score, so you can get a competitive rate.
Wow. So when you kind of look at, I mean, that was some good information. Definitely heard that one. 2 years employed, at least 12 months, no derogatory late payments or anything in that respect. So, also I hear about this down payment. And then I heard about the city that we have a down payment assistance program. So can you explain a little bit more about that?
Yes, we have up to $40,000 for first-time home buyers, and we have 2 pots of down payment assistance. So we have funding for families who are considered low to moderate income according to HUD standards, and that's under 80% AMI. We have $40,000 for that. But then the city created another program, Home at Norfolk, and that's for 3 Pacific neighborhoods, Oakdale Farms, Monticello Village, and Ingleside, to create the void for families between 80 and 120% AMI. Because what we're finding is families who are 80 to 120 are pretty much the same debt written than families under 80% AMI. So we wanted to give them an opportunity to be able to purchase and provide some down payment and closing cost assistance as well.
Wow, that's great to know. When we think about what resources exist specifically for first-time home buyers.
There's quite a few for first-time home buyers, and I tell everybody, please do your research, because once you purchase, you won't be able to get a lot of these resources again. So we have what you call the Vita Match program, where you put up $1 and you can get $10 for every dollar you put up to $10,000. We actually deployed $256,000 this year so far, in the Vita Match program. We have the down payment program. So we have that as well. Budget coaching, credit improvement, education class, and that one-on-one counseling is so important. And again, you have so many other banks out here who have what you call Federal Home Loan Bank. That's a $17,000 grant that's available. They have other smaller grants like $2,500. So when you start layering 40,000 plus 10,000 plus 17,000, that's how we're getting down to the $1,600 monthly payment, as well as we have a Spark 1% discount rate, which is, so if the rate today is say 6%, you can get a 5% interest rate, which helps you with more buying power. So it's important to understand the resources, that can help you get to where you need to be.
So it's kind of a follow-up to that one. Is there any particular caps on how much an individual makes and how many individuals are actually in the household to qualify for some of these opportunities?
There are, and I'm gonna give you this example. So for a family of 2 to get the $40,000, you cannot exceed $68,950. So from the 80 to 120% AMI for a family of 2, the max that you can make is 103,400. So Virginia Housing is another great resource. They have what you call 100% financing, where you don't have to put a down payment. They also have a grant of 3% where you can get 103%, but that 3%, so let's say on 200,000, that's 6,000 to help you with your down payment, that's not forgiven. You have to pay that back, but again, for someone who doesn't qualify for these grants, that's another great opportunity.
Right. And I'm adding these things into the chat for anybody who comes back later so they can click on them. Also, individuals will notice there's a QR code in the corner that they can point their phone to, and it'll take you right to your HomeNet website, to their website for individuals. So what are some of the, I guess, common mistakes that individuals make sometimes?
Ooh, the biggest one is buying a car when you buy a house. Okay, so just to give you a quick story, we had a client who bought a car, and I remember the payment because it was $580. That was probably my first house payment.
Mhm.
And, I said, well, how long is that car payment? And they said 7 years. I said, I'll see you in 7 years because you just blew your opportunity to purchase a house. Because when we go back to debt to income ratio, now they no longer qualified for a house.
Oh,
So also when you are going through the mortgage process, you cannot open up new credit because that can drop your score,
mhm.
as well, and mess up your debt to income ratio. Changing jobs in the middle of getting mortgage approved can also create a denial for you as well. Spending your money prior to closing, and also ignoring some of your credit issues that you need to take care of, because you might go to a lender and they say, okay, we need you to take care of this prior to closing, and they don't, and then the loan does not close. But the biggest one I see is actually families purchasing a car in the midst of buying.
Wow. Didn't realize that one. So in other words, you would recommend that person pay off that car if they can before they.
Well, you just don't buy a new car, so you've already been approved, with your current debt.
Mhm.
um, then you're good. But what happens is, you go out and you buy something new, and then that changes your debt ratios.
Got it. Got it. Okay. All right. So are there programs out there for moderate income families?
That is the Home with Norfolk program that the city created, up to $40,000. And those are for 3 specific neighborhoods,
Mhm.
and that's for Monticello Village, Oakdale Farms, and Ingleside. You also have Virginia Housing, their 100% financing program. It's a great program, if you do not qualify for the down payment, because one of the biggest barriers is coming up with your 3.5% or 3% down payment, for the mortgage loan.
Wow. So that's good to know. So what if, home ownership just really feels out of reach? What's advice would you give someone?
This is never out of reach. And when you hear the stories of clients who hung in there, did the work, because the biggest thing is commitment, because I always say life happens, I always say, usually Christmas time, most people spend more than they can spend. They blow their opportunity. January, I play a song, we all fall down, but we get up. So it's like, okay, let's
Mhm.
keep moving. So I tell everybody, have a plan. What's your plan? Some guidance. That's where the housing counselor comes in. Commitment is so important, because we get so many clients who walk through this door who say that they want home ownership, but then they cannot commit, to being financially savvy with their money, saving, paying down the debt, clearing up the barriers, staying the track. They can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mhm.
At one point, I used to feel really like, oh, wow, I want you to have it. But when they walk away, that's a win, because what I don't want is them to foreclose later. So the commitment is very important. Educate yourself, educate yourself, educate yourself. And always remember, every homeowner was a renter.
Hmm.
So the biggest thing is, don't give up.
Okay. That's good stuff there. So if you could share a success story that really demonstrates the impact of these different programs that you mentioned today.
We have quite a few. So I'll share one, and she will be at the housing forum. She purchased in 2014 new construction home, public housing resident, uh, new construction home. So she's been in that house for a while, since
Mhm.
2014. I can't even fathom the equity she has today. But what I'm seeing is, once clients purchase, whether you are public housing, non-public housing, teacher, because we get all type of clientele who come through this door. Once you purchase and own, I'm finding it changes the trajectory of that family. You know, they're going back to school. Their kids are now coming back through the program. You know, my mother came through the program. She told me to come to your class. You know, so we're seeing generational changes. You know, we're seeing generational wealth. We're seeing families who purchase, who stay, because as Dr. Perry said, you know, interest rates are high, so people aren't moving, you know, and that's fine for the ones who own, because they're still building what? Equity. They're still building wealth, you know. So I'm just finding that the dynamics of these families, and the belief in themselves, especially for the ones who felt they never could do it, you know, and to see the confidence within themselves is just amazing. It's incredible. You know, I want to put a storyline together of just the successes. So that's the biggest story that I see. You know, people who come through this door and feel like they cannot, and when they get the keys to their home, the joy on their faces, and when they tell their family and friends, you know, and they come through the door, and I, you know, if they're say, well, Miss such and such came through, she did it, I can do it. You know, so seeing someone, your peers do it, you know, it is a little better than me saying you could do it. But to see your peer actually, you know, get the keys and see them ring the bell of success, you know, then that encouraged them to come through that door and do it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to take this opportunity. Thanks for sharing all that information, to bring back in Dr. Perry with us. There we go. And this is an opportunity. So if you're watching live now, and I had a couple of individuals who did share some questions. I'm going to bring those up so that we can see those. And I think this first question will be geared towards you, Dr. Perry. But it was like, if 98% of Norfolk is built out already, where does the development opportunity lie to create new affordable living spaces for community members looking to become homeowners?
Sure. Well, we always say all development in Norfolk is redevelopment, because we are so built out, and so it is looking at. But we have some vacant land, and so we've been utilizing that vacant land towards home ownership through our auction program. We sell the lots through an auction at assessed value, very low rates, and folks are building single family homes on them, and we require them to be home ownership for up to 7 years. So that's we're building on that home ownership opportunities in the city. But again, looking at that commercial property, right, that we can turn into some residential opportunities as well. So we've really got to think, we'll have to think creatively. We'll have to work with our private partners who are looking to sell property. We'll have to utilize our own vacant property. And then, you know, will be redevelopment of, you know, assets that again are not, you know, not performing or vacant.
Yeah, and I think, and Brandon McCain is a Maury Commodore, but he lives up in D.C. He talked about, you know, converting them into apartments like they do in D.C. But I think there's an opportunity. You said it. You know, a city like Norfolk, it's redevelopment, and you also mentioned about NOAA, natural reoccurring housing stock. So there's also an emphasis from the commission also looking at how we can put resources in to help with rehab and to create those new opportunities there. Now, Mr. McCain also had another question, and this was no McDonald's. We should be replaced with quality food options. McDonald's is the only thing that's going there. And I think that you re-emphasize that we are looking for other retailers to be there. But most importantly, you mentioned that the old McDonald's got moved because we now have a street and a light there. And so we reconnected downtown to the new community. And so the benefit will be that individuals that are living in that community in a very mixed income community will now have all the benefits of downtown and some of the other things that we're looking to bring there.
That's right. And you know, it's important for us not to displace a long-standing community business, right?
Yeah.
That had been serving the community for a very long time. Residents desire to see it come back. And we didn't want this redevelopment to displace that. And so, but there will be lots of other opportunities for various different types of, whether it be food options, eateries, that sort of thing. Lots of 39,000 square feet of opportunity, in fact.
Definitely. So here's the question, and either one of you could respond to this one. How does housing policy and home ownership opportunities work together?
Susan, I'll let you start.
Sure. I think, I think Norfolk is leading the way in some of this, right? So, our planning department created a policy, right? They have a plan
Mhm.
book, pattern book, if you will, of homes that can be built on 25-foot lots. And so these are often, sort of the longer, narrow housing type that you see very frequently in Norfolk. But sometimes they're difficult to get past planning and in the past, sort of all of the things that come with that. And so planning, in order to make it much easier, develop this plan book with stamped engineers plans. And if a builder comes along and builds, that plan, and it's got hundreds of different options that they can choose from and make different, then they automatically bypass the permitting. It's automatically permitted. So they bypass all of that time that would be spent on getting an architect and engineer plans and going through the plan review process with planning. They're able to move directly to permit and construction. So I think that's a really nice example of how policy and homeownership can kind of work together, and we can make it easier as cities to build.
Sean, you got anything you want to add to that one?
From the homeownership standpoint, I just want to, the city has been a great listener, so we will talk about some of the issues and some of the barriers that we are experiencing. And the city will come up with programs like the Home with Norfolk, which is through strengthening Norfolk neighborhoods. And that's how we actually came up with the $40,000 for families from 80 to 120% AMI. So it's a great collaboration to see it from the boots on the ground. From a policy standpoint, so it's been a great partnership.
Definitely. And serving on the mayor's housing commission, I know that LaShawn, when you came in to present to us, even about the home buying process, being able to use the Section 8 voucher and then become a homeowner. But the reality is that in order for that really to be successful, because we had several individuals who, I guess, they had 6 months in order to try to find something. And if they don't find something, then they go back into this cycle again, which really leads into the other piece. If we don't have enough homes that are within that income level, then it becomes challenging. So I think, Dr. Perry, you mentioned definitely about opportunities for us to streamline zoning policy to be able to help builders to come in and speed that up. And then there's also this discussion about if we increase the number of or not just affordable, but housing options within the city, then we can potentially drive down the cost. But I have to caution individuals that Norfolk is taking the lead on it, but everybody knows that we are the 7 cities, and it really has to be a regional approach to this. And the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission is looking at that regionally because it didn't happen overnight. As far as being 56% renters and 48% having all subsidized housing, but those two working together, we can do some things. And so this is why I'm excited about the things that we could potentially come up with in the fall as we present the new housing policy. And so I'm just going to give you this opportunity to re-emphasize to somebody looking to buy. I wanted to use this opportunity to tell folks about Saturday and the Home Ownership Forum Part 2 that we're going to have. But we are booked. We're at capacity.
We did open it up a little bit. I saw a few tickets left.
Okay.
We went from 300 and we boosted that. So please, if you are interested, come out Saturday to our Norfolk State event, second annual Unlocking Doors, to homeownership, wealth, and legacy. And one of the biggest things that we're also working on for clients who have purchased, is really making sure that they're doing that estate planning, wills, and securing their legacy. So that's a big thing just because of experience and some of the things that I've seen. I've been pushing that a lot because we don't, we buy the property,
Mhm.
and like, okay, what's next? How do we leave? And I've seen so many families torn apart, because who knew, COVID would happen. And so many people were torn apart where houses became just basically estates, and they had to go through a lot to handle that. So wills, estates, down payment come out Saturday. Also, we have a $500 free giveaway.
Okay.
And I just want to thank you, Councilman Clanton, because this was your baby from last year, and we're just carrying on this legacy.
No, I appreciate it. I tell folks all the time, I did not realize that I would become the housing councilman. But everybody knows that I'm an urban leaguer. I worked in community action, so my really big four things I've always focused has been on education, employment, housing, and health. And so this really falls within that wheelhouse there. So just in some closing out remarks, and we're at 7:32 now. Question for you: what gives you hope about the future of housing in Norfolk? What gives you hope about the future of housing in Norfolk?
Is that for me or
Both.
Susan?
That'll be my closing question to both of you.
Ooh, hope. The Housing Commission, I am hopeful, that we focus on the need for affordable housing in the city. Also, opportunities to look for other resources to help first-time home buyers. And as Susan said, working with the private industry to come in and try to build more in the city of Norfolk in a shorter period of time. So that is my hope, that we can create more affordable housing, the interest rates will go down so people can, buy.
Great. Thank you. Dr. Perry?
Mine will be it will be a hopeful answer, but wrapped maybe in a little bit of pessimism, which is, there's a housing crisis all across the country, right? There is a supply gap given the fact that we haven't built, enough housing over the last 20 years, not just in Norfolk, but all around the country. And at the conference I just came from, sort of the theme was never waste a crisis, right? And so this is our opportunity to, talk to our legislators to get more funding for housing at the federal level, at the state level, the local level, to, do better partnerships with our developers and find ways in which, we can creatively think about how we get more housing in a shorter time frame. So I feel like, sort of we're at this moment in time when it's necessary and sort of has this open window of opportunity.
Definitely. And you kind of did a precursor to what I'll probably do as a follow-up here with Senator Andrew Williams-Graves and Delegate Benita Anthony and other members of our delegation, because there were several pieces of legislation that came through the General Assembly, some that have been signed through dealing with this theme of affordability and housing. So I want to definitely educate individuals about that and what that looks like to support. So ladies, I appreciate y'all. I know y'all work long days, but just want you to know that this councilman is appreciative, because I know when I asked you all, you didn't know. It's like, what is this going to be? But I hope that you all, when we work throughout the technology there, but that somebody will come back and watch this and they'll see the links that I have in there, and they'll be able to share that information. And again, I'm going to make sure I put it out there now that I know it's open back up. We got a couple tickets available for the forum. So come out. If you're just inquisitive to figure out how you make that next step, I can tell you, you never know until you take that step. It'll always be a shoulda, coulda moment until you take the first step. And so I'm looking forward myself staying the whole time, and then I'm out because I think we're from 9 to 12, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So Councilman Clanton is going through the process. I'm gonna be there and sitting in the session. But ladies, I thank you. Y'all have a great one, and I'll see you on Saturday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. So everybody, I just want to again thank Dr. Susan Perry and LaShawn Fortes for taking the time out to share and to provide information. For those who are coming and checking this out later, again, I'm going to continue the conversation and putting items in there. I'll do a post tomorrow that will also provide some information for you so that you can be able to take a look at that. The other thing that I wanted to put in there for you all was about the actual report. The report is available, and this is in regards to the interim housing report. We mentioned that a couple times So the interim housing report is available. I'm going to drop that link into the chat as well. So you have an opportunity that you can be able to check that. I'm also, if you are watching this later, you can scan that QR code and be able to see that. But I'm putting the interim housing report link into the chat as well, and you can be able to check that out. But again, it had been mentioned, I thought we were full because I think we had over 300 people. But check out my Instagram or my Facebook page. I'll put information on about the housing. And if you have signed up, if you go to councilmanclanton.com to my website there, you can actually go there and find additional information. And if you have a question in regards to that, I'm going to also put this is my email. So if you have a follow-up question about something that was shared here tonight, definitely go to carlosclanton@norfolk.gov and get that additional information. But I'm going to continue to do these. My goal right now is to do some type of live with a theme every month that is informative, that will be able to give you the necessary information, and again, that you can utilize in your day-to-day life. And so with that, everybody, I want to give you back the remainder of your evening and say thank you. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Take care.